And I forgot to press the record button. There's an update. Let's talk about it. So, if you don't know, recently it looks like Torjim has released yet another fabulous hot load all over our faces here. So, there's a lot to go through. So, let's go ahead and actually take this one step at a time, and we'll get through this hunky-dory, okay? So, the first thing that comes straight out of the gate here, we have a brand new rarity introduced into this game. Now, the whole point of this brand new rarity called Special, as indicated by these turquoise green color here, is it's supposed to be an intermediate between the rare blue and the epic purple, because apparently the time between the rare blue and the epic purple is too wide of a gap for most players, so they threw in a special little tier right there. And with this tier, it's mostly going to be filled with stuff that we already know, like the Piercer and the Goblin shotgun. Those are going to be thrown in there, even though they're not really new weapons. They're kind of in between the epic and rare tier. This also means that we're also going to get some brand new weapons that are kind of like a downgraded version of the epic tier equivalent. So let's actually get into those real quickly here, shall we? So like I said here, we actually have these brand new, rather I should say, brand new rarity out of the old weapons here, such as the Piercer. And if you take a look over here, we have the Goblin as well. So these really are not going to be changed too much in terms of values and stats, but they're just going to be placed in this brand new shiny tier just for the sake of clarity, I suppose. This also most likely means they'll actually have a changed crafting recipe too, but we'll get into that later. So for one of the brand new weapons here, we have the Sinus Zero machine gun, and essentially what this is that it's the downgraded version of the Spectre, because it has less durability, probably less, more mass, and lesser stats overall. But the perk is kind of there. Instead of it being a 5% stacking 10 times that lasts 2 seconds, this now is a 2% stack stacking up to 10 times for a maximum of 20 instead of 50. So this thing is going to do less damage overall, but it gets new players exposed to this idea of perks within the game. And this is a trend that's going to continue on for a lot of the guns here. So for next one here, we actually have the Mace Shotgun, which shares a very similar perk to that of the Thunderbolt shotgun, where for every 40 meters traveled, you gain a stacking damage buff for your next shot, going up to 4 times. I believe for the Thunderbolt it's 25%, this one's only 10%, so a small damage bonus, but enough to actually encourage shotgun players to move around. We also have the ZS-34 Hulk turreted cannon. So essentially this is meant to be a downgraded version of the Fat Man with a 0.2 second reload perk for a successful hit. And we also have the AC-50 Storm autocannon, which is essentially supposed to be a very accurate long-range version autocannon like the Rapier, not like the Jewel. And like the Whirlwind, it's going to have increasing damage the farther you shoot. However, this one is only going to be a 14%. I believe Whirlwind is something like 25 to 30%. So this one is considerably less, but it still encourages the person to use this weapon in a very sniping and supportive fashion. We also here have 2 brand new turrets that are going to be the downgraded version of the Owl and the Anaconda, respectively. However, it looks like their stats and perks haven't really been finalized into this game yet. And if you actually try using these weapons, you actually find that the copter here actually acts more like the Falcon, and this turret acts more like the Cobra, which is strange because the upgraded version of this, or rather the epic version of this, is actually a rocket launcher for both of them essentially. So how a player is supposed to get used to the fact that this, instead of being a rocket launcher, is actually a machine gun turret is going to be quite different. We also actually have a limited angle cannon up here called the Prosecutor 76mm. And this essentially is supposed to be the upgraded version of the Judge, and has a very similar perk to the 88, where it actually has a small amount of penetration, I wasn't able to get the information on that in time, but you gather the idea. It's supposed to be a downgraded version of the epic weapon, except for the case of the drones, which looks like they haven't been finalized yet. On a side note with this brand new rarity, while the rarity itself will actually act as an intermediary between rare and epic, the overall crafting time and production cost to craft an epic item shall not change, as mentioned right here. So while you will have to craft this special tier in order to make the epic tier items, they are going to be reduced crafting cost overall, so that you're not really effectively spending more money to get to the epic tier. So you really shouldn't see any change in price with regards to the epic tier. So what do you guys think about this? Do you think this actual brand new tier into the game will actually be more beneficial to new players? And what do you think about the brand new weapons? Do the brand new weapons actually add a brand new element to this game that'll actually be interesting in a second? Let me know down below. In this next update, we also are actually going to get a brand new change to the upgrade system. So if you don't know, currently the upgrade system operates like this. You combine 3 items to get 1 item that has like 1 out of a dozen stats modified. So usually it could be like 5% extra damage, 10% extra tonnage, 10% extra durability. You get the idea. A modest bump to 1 stat, which most of the stats are going to end up being quite useless. So upgrading was a very niche feature. Now, there's a lot of words in here that are trying to describe a system here, but essentially, instead of now you only getting 1 stat, you now get 3 stat bonuses that come from 3 categories. So let's actually take a look at an example of this real quickly. So for some background here, we have the lovely new Bastion cabin here. We'll talk about the new cabin changes here in a second, but you can see all the stats here: 55 max speed, 8700 tonnage, 2050 kilogram mass limit, and 12 energy with 500 durability and 450 mass. So if you go over here, we now have this brand new upgrade tree. It looks like none of the text has been properly fit in there, and I'm assuming that's because they haven't quite finalized the system yet. But you can still get a general idea. So you can see we have 3 kind of categories here: construction, damage, and usability. And I'm assuming this is going to change for all kind of items in this game that can be upgraded. So weapons, modules, wheels, tracks, hovers, cabins, they're all going to have their own different categories and stats in which they can be modified. But cabin's just going to be the one we're going to look at today. So in this case, we have for construction, we have health, which I'm assuming is durability, mass, which I'm assuming is the overall weight of the vehicle, as well as self-protection, which may be referring to its special little hole here that has damage resistance. Down on the damage section, we have the self-destruct damage, the self-destruct blast radius, and the self-destruct delay. So that's going to allow you to do more damage or more quickly, depending on whatever you get. And down here in the usability or utility section, we have extra engine power, tonnage, and critical mass, which I'm assuming critical mass is supposed to be mass limit here. It's kind of interesting about the engine power, considering that Bastion already has maximum power, so weird. But if you actually upgrade this, which still consumes 3 items, it gives you 1 back. You still actually get 3 out of the 9 possibilities here, 1 from each category here. So you're more likely to get an overall improved cabin as opposed to a item that you're not going to really like. So in a way, you're still going to come out with an actual usable upgrade here. So it's quite nice. And as you can see with this one, we have the extra, or rather reduced mass. But in this case, it glitched out and actually gave us more mass, because we started off with 4,500 and ended up with 5,400. So we gained 900 kilograms. Whoops. Well, so we also have the self-destruct delay and the engine power here. So not really terribly good stats for the Bastion here and for my first upgrade, but I could still have seen this being a lot more useful, especially if I was to throw a crap ton of wheels on a car like this. So once they actually iron out the details of this, I can see this being a very interesting system. We also have another one here, the Humpback here, which has very similar, how should I say, stats to the Bastion here. And with that, I also got a few different perks here as well. So we had the extra mass, or rather reduced mass it's supposed to be, the self-destruct damage, as well as the increased tonnage. but I believe in this case it actually reduced tonnage, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, we started off at 83 and we ended with 83. All right, it didn't change tonnage at all. So probably not the best idea, but once they actually finalize all these stats, this system actually looks like it's going to be way more useful than the old one, especially when those discounted upgrades come around. Basically, everyone's going to be using that for their cabins, since you're going to be much more likely to get a perk that's going to be very, very, very useful. So tell me what you guys actually think about this system here. I'm actually quite excited for a change like this, since this is actually going to result in way more usable combinations here than previously experienced. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see with maybe more late tier players. Let me know down below what you think. And on a quick side note with this, all previous upgraded weapons that only had the one stat will actually see a slight bump in that stat to compensate for the fact that they don't have the 3 individualized stats. So if you have a weapon that has, overheating in this case, it will likely go up to 12% or more, depending on what value they actually want it to be at. And you can also upgrade that weapon too if you want to get the 3 individualized stats as opposed to just the 1 static stat. So now we get to this lovely, lovely cabin rework system here that is in no way at all causing a bit of controversy here. So essentially they're going down the route of rarity being the determinant factor of energy instead of, say, cabin perk and rarity. So in this case we have a base of 8, with a common having a nice 9 energy, rare having 10, special having 11, and epic having this 12 energy here. So what this means is that the quantum and the humpback are both going to have 12 energy. No longer does the light cabins actually have that lightness and the extra durability, or rather the extra energy associated with this. So let's actually take a look here at the cabin changes more specifically. Oh, and I should also quickly mention here that this actually comes with a whole slew of parameter changes for most of the cabins here. So let's actually go over those real quickly. Sorry if my lovely little face here is obscuring some of these stats here, but you can kind of still get the idea. So we have the old and the new cabin, the old one being on the current server, and the new one being proposed on the test server. So as you can see here, we have a variety of stat changes going on here. Of course, the obvious one for this heavy cabin is the increase in energy, but we also do see an increase in mass limit for the Bastion, as well as a tonnage nerf and a speed nerf to the Bastion as well. So it appears to be a variety of mixing of buffs and nerfs to this cabin. But as you go through all of these changes, you may actually notice a general trend, and that is heavy cabins tend to have their speed, tonnage, and mass limit lowered, while their energy is bumped up, while with light cabins, they will see an overall increase in their tonnage and mass limit to compensate for the fact that they're going to be less appealing than the heavy counterpart. So I'm just going to go ahead and click through all of these lovely pictures that we have here, and you can pause to see which ones if you are focused on individual cabins. I will also have a Reddit post down below in which I have all of these images uploaded so that you can take a look at them at your own leisure. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we can find. So we have the Blight Cabin here. As you can see, tonnage and mass limit have been affected, as well as durability. Perk stays the same. Same thing with the Cerberus. You have the Echo, which sees a mass limit and tonnage nerf, and a quite substantial tonnage nerf too. We have the Favorite Cabin, which got a mass limit and tonnage bonus, as well as a speed bonus too. Ghost Cabin got a mass limit nerf and a tonnage stays the same, while speed has gone up considerably. We also have the Harpy here. Again, we got a mass limit increase and a tonnage increase, as well as a speed nerf. So you can go through this all at your own leisure here. So overall, what we're likely going to see is more use of heavy cabins, like the Bastion, like the Echo, like the Humpback, since those for a hot second have become less than favorable given the current situation. So there we go, those are all the cabin changes there. You can go ahead, like I said, go back, pause, or go down to the Reddit post if you want to see these pictures at your own leisure and take a look at the stats at your own time. So let me know what you actually guys think about these overall changes to the cabins down below as well. I'm expecting to see way more heavy use of heavy cabins and maybe a little bit more build diversity, but you may also see a much less use of lighter cabins for another particular reason that we're going to discuss here pretty soon. And down here we can also see that we got a lovely change here to radars here. And this is mostly actually going to affect radars in the sense that people who use radars as blast armor, since decorations were recently nerfed, and radars are now going to go down roughly the same path, because radars are going to no longer absorb damage from an explosion caused by a projectile hitting them. So essentially, now radars have pass-through damage. So instead of them being this great spatial armor, they're now actually going to have a lot of their damage actually bleed through and hit the structure parts underneath it, so they're not going to be nearly as protective as they once were. And this is mainly aimed at the floating radar ships that were coded around in 10 or 20 RU-20 Keens for Clan Wars. So you're going to see much less use of those. They still might be more effective towards, say, machine gun fire, but we're probably going to go back to more spaced armor dealt with traditional armor. So that's really kind of the whole change to them. This kind of just goes into the more specifics of how it's actually going to work, but it's going to basically be the exact same thing that happened with decorations. Decorations got passed through with explosions, so they dropped off in popularity massively overnight. So this is going to be exactly the exact same thing. And I actually think this is going to be an overall good change, because I felt like this made Clan Wars a little bit more elitist, in the sense that unless you had thousands upon thousands of coins to throw away on radars, you were usually at a very significant disadvantage versus other cannon users who were using radars. So this is actually going to be overall, I think, a positive effect for the community here. But let me know what you guys think down below. Is having radar with pass-through damage on explosion a good thing or a bad thing? Let me know down below. And now we come to the absolute least controversial aspect to this whole thing, the hover balance tweaks yet again. So again, a lot of words here, but essentially what happened to the hovers is three things. One, the hover, its strafing acceleration is reduced by 25%. And that is pretty substantial. So essentially, hovers used to be able to go 75 kilometers an hour while strafing, and now they can only go about, I think, 45 kilometers an hour is their maximum speed. And the reason why they're doing it that way is because most hover builds are actually sideways hover builds. And the reason why they're doing that is because sideways hover builds are just massively more successful than traditional frontways, proper facing hover builds. And I'm assuming they noticed that, and that wasn't an intended feature, so it looks like they're just cracking down on that massively. They also implemented a couple of other changes here as well. So the flight altitude of cars has now been reduced by 14%. So this is going to make them much more likely to collide with environmental properties, as well make them much less likely to climb things. And they're also going to be much more vulnerable to melee users as well. But to account for this reduced hover distance, as well as the strafe speed nerf, they've also increased the durability of the hovers a considerable amount here by giving them essentially an extra 30 to 50 durability respectively. So the Icarus 4 went from 160 to 208, and the Icarus 7 from 135 to 176 durability. So they're going to be quite substantially more beefy for each hover. So they're going to be much more likely to survive, which is the whole reason why people did sideways builds. So that may prompt more people to actually do traditional hover builds, or people may just suck up and still use the strafing builds because they're just that much better. But overall, this has actually caused a mass panic, and people are starting to sell the living crap out of their hovers here. So let me know what you guys think down below here. Personally, I'm a little bit biased against hovers because I never really liked using them. Whenever I played against them on my wheel, tracked, or leg builds, I always felt I was at a very significant disadvantage, especially if they had long-range weapons. So I feel like this is actually going to result overall and more balance with wheels, tracks, and legs. In fact, people are starting to say that legs are to become more of the dominant meta in Clan Wars, so we'll see how that actually works out, because, like I said, all of these changes that I've mentioned before, with changes to rarity, cabins, radar armor, these are all likely going to be tweaked, changed, or even straight up tossed out in the upcoming months. So if you guys actually have any sort of discussion, by all means leave it in the comments down below. But also don't be afraid to actually come down here to the forums and actually leave your thoughts about this. Plenty of people have already left their thoughts about this, so by all means, let your voice be heard. But other than that, I want to thank you all for joining me this evening. If you had fun, follow on whatever platform is your favorite. We're on Twitch, we're on YouTube. Both of those get their exclusive content. Other than that, there is Discord and Twitter down below if you want to get notified. Wow, I am absolutely articulate. If you want to get notified whenever I go live, as well as join the community. Other than that, there is probably nothing else down there. I don't know. Maybe you might find some weird stuff. Who knows? But I want to thank you all again for joining me this evening, and we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.